And what the AI does is in real time, it understands what are the risks that are happening while you're driving. So it looks at the road ahead of you, and are there stop signs coming up, other vehicles, pedestrians, kids, bicyclists. It looks at what the driver is doing, in particular what the driver is paying attention to, and if they've fallen asleep or they're distracted by food or a mobile phone. And it looks at what the vehicle is doing. And increasingly, we're looking at the location history as well. So we know which locations are very dangerous or what kind of risks happen where. All of that happens in real time on board the vehicle, and that's really important. It's different from a lot of other AI that's used to process data after the fact, because our goal really is to look 5-6 seconds into the future to predict, is this getting dangerous?
Stefan Heck, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders in the Matis Experiment. Really glad to have you here. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is an opportunity for me again to dive in and meet another person who has the best job in the world, and tackling something that you deeply care about with the people you care to do it with under a vision that motivates you and guides you. So a lot of ways to look at this question from different angles, and so I'll start off. Stefan, tell me a little bit about Nauto and what you're doing within the sort of the intersection of artificial intelligence and commercial fleets, and how these worlds are intersecting, obviously, with the explosion of AI over the last few years, and the verticalized applications here. And it's just so that we can have a little bit of background as to what you really do in the day-to-day.
Yeah, so Nauto's an AI company. I started it about 10 years ago. We deploy AI into vehicles, working with both fleet owners, vehicle manufacturers, insurance companies. It's a subscription service, or what's called SaaS, software as a service, or in this case, AI as a service. So we charge per vehicle per year. It's a simple fee. And what the AI does is in real time, it understands what are the risks that are happening while you're driving. So it looks at the road ahead of you, and are there stop signs coming up, other vehicles, pedestrians, kids, bicyclists. It looks at what the driver is doing, in particular what the driver is paying attention to, and if they've fallen asleep or they're distracted by food or a mobile phone. And it looks at what the vehicle is doing. And increasingly, we're looking at the location history as well. So we know which locations are very dangerous or what kind of risks happen where. All of that happens in real time on board the vehicle, and that's really important. It's different from a lot of other AI that's used to process data after the fact, because our goal really is to look 5-6 seconds into the future to predict, is this getting dangerous? And then to empower the driver to avoid that risk before anything bad happens. So it isn't just about, you had a collision, which there's a lot of telematic systems, that's what they do. But it's about, wow, watch out. This is getting really scary. You should slow down, leave more following distance, put your phone away, whatever it might be. And through that, we are able to very, very quickly, in a matter of days, eliminate most of the driving risks, typically between 80 and 90%, and reduce the collisions that you're going to have by about 2/3. In the best case, it's over 90%, but typically it's about 2/3. So it's really phenomenal. And most people don't realize, there's a lot of safety technologies out there in vehicles, airbags, backup cameras, if you go back in time, the brake, the invention of the seatbelt. And if you look at the previous best technology, it was the seatbelt in the 50s and 60s, which reduced collisions and injuries about 20%. And, here we are getting about 65% reduction in collisions. It's pretty phenomenal. So it's exciting. Wow. It's why I love this role. I love what Nauto does every day.
Help me understand a little bit better the landscape and the ecosystem behind where you're at. So we're talking about the pain point of predictive abilities to be able, right, to prevent different things that could happen, in commercial fleets and driving and different behaviors, and then making recommendations based on that. Tell me, can you share a little bit about where this fits into the ecosystem of the driving experience? In terms of the product, the car, where the recommendations actually take place. Sure. How does the product actually work?
Yeah, so today we're working with commercial fleets. So this would be, not only long haul trucking, which everybody thinks about, but a lot of service fleets, delivery fleets, the package delivery companies that come to your house, the technicians that come and install air conditioning, cable, telephone, etc. So it's a lot of light commercial vehicles, vans and pickup trucks, as well as large trucks and sedans. In terms of who's involved in this ecosystem, there's the vehicle manufacturer. And if you're buying a later model car, you have the option to put in collision avoidance systems, safety systems. Unlike passenger vehicles, where they're often now standard, for commercial vehicles, they're typically an option package. So the fleet has to decide to add that. There's the fleet itself, which usually has a safety team and a set of officials whose day job is to make sure the drivers are safe. And then if you're a very large fleet, you're typically self-insured. But if you're a mid-sized fleet, you have an insurance company involved as well. And the insurance company is really mostly after the fact. They process claims. They may do some what they call loss mitigation. But loss mitigation is really training after you've had bad collisions to avoid the next one. The safety team does a lot of training proactively, particularly when you hire a new driver. That first 12 months is very risky. Just like we all know, if anybody's ever had a teenager, that first couple of years of the teenager driving is very risky. It takes a while to really get good. The difference with Nauto is we go into the vehicle, and if it already has compute and sensors, we just add our software. But if it doesn't, we add a sensor package that goes on the windshield. It's a small package that sits on your windscreen, and that adds the sensors and the compute. And then in terms of your question, when and where does it happen? That package in real time, 15 times a second, is assessing the risk of the situation holistically. So we detect individual risks, and then we assemble them in a situation assessment. For example, if you're, holding your phone, right? You might be doing this, holding your phone up to your ear. That's above normal risk. That's about 9 times normal driving risk. Now, if you're looking down at your phone and you're texting, it jumps to 32 times normal driving risk. But where it combines is, let's say you're also speeding. Speeding by itself is not super risky. It's between 20 and 40% elevated risk. Again, assuming you're not going 100 miles per hour, then of course it's much riskier. But a little bit of speeding, like most people do, it's not super dangerous by itself. And then let's take a pedestrian crossing. Pedestrian crossing is also 9 times normal driving risk. But where things get really interesting, and what Nauto is uniquely doing, is we put these risks together. Because if the pedestrian's crossing and you're looking down at your phone texting, these two risks don't add. If they added, you'd be about 32 times normal driving risk. But actually, you're going to be 2,700 times normal driving risk. And anytime you take that kind of risk, where the risk is 1,000 times normal driving risk, you're going to have a collision. It's just a matter of time before your luck runs out. So that's where we intervene. What we do is we do a set of voice and behavioral nudges. It begins pretty gentle, just a reminder, put your phone down. Or the speeding one, for example, is it gives you this like subtle suggestion of slowing down. That's the lowest level. As you get riskier, it'll give you voice coaching. So we'll say, for example, pull over to use your phone. And we're very focused on what's the biggest thing you can do to reduce your risk right now. I have this highly technical term that we've designed for, which is when we intervene, we want the driver to go, oh, shit. Because if they go, oh, shit, and we talk about oh, shit moments, that's when the adults learn. Even as an experienced driver, you may have 30 years of driving experience, but if you have one of these, oh, my God, that was dangerous moments, that's where you adjust your behavior.
Absolutely.
And in the most acute risk, let's say you're about to hit somebody or something, it's an alarm because there's no time for you to listen to voice, think about what to do. It's just a screeching alarm to get you to swerve or brake. And through that, we've been able to help fleets avoid over 30,000 collisions in the last 2 years. So it's really, everybody at Nauto is inspired by this mission of saving lives. It's hard to know how many of those 30,000 collisions would have been fatal. But based on statistics, somewhere between 30 and 40. So there's, 30, 35 people walking around today who are only alive because Nauto protected them.
That's obviously being able to measure, to use something that has something to do with life saving as a metric for the company. I can only imagine, it's probably incredibly inspiring and motivating. Can you double click a little bit into how do you measure this, and how do you generate a somewhat rigorous thinking about translating the alerts that you create or the work that you do towards the impact it has on something like saving collisions or ultimately saving lives. And obviously, I'm sure part of it is an estimation. But what signals do you bring in to be able to then put on a big dashboard and say, hey, look, we as an organization are making a huge impact because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, it's actually pretty deeply analytical. We have a lot of data scientists and we get deep into the risk science. There's three parts. The first part is having really, really good AI that's rigorously trained so that it's very quick, it's very precise, and it doesn't have a lot of false positives. Because if you alert somebody about a risk that isn't there, people get really upset. It's called backseat driving. So if I tell you, slow down and there's nothing there, you're going to say, what? Why are you bothering me? So we don't want to be backseat drivers. So that's the AI part. And we shoot for super high precision so that you can detect the risk accurately. And it's really important to do it fast. There's a lot of dash cameras that claim they have AI in them now. A lot of those dash cameras see only a small number of risks and see them 6-7 seconds later. 6 or 7 seconds when you're driving is an eternity. A lot could have happened in 6 seconds, right? So our technology, we're really focused on detecting risks in under 100 milliseconds. That's a tenth of a second, so that you're really instantly seeing that risk. The second part gets into behavioral psychology. What feedback do I give the driver so that they really change? Because there's a fine line between warning you about something that you didn't see and annoying you about something that's very obvious, right? So if I'm looking at the stop sign with my gaze, telling me there's a stop sign coming up is super annoying. Now, if I'm looking down at my phone or I'm looking over at a person on the left and I didn't see the stop sign and I'm not slowing down at all, then it's helpful. That's one of these, oh shit, that was really dangerous experiences. So that's the second most important part. And then third is, how do you know what difference you made? The way we do that is we rigorously do a scientific controlled experiment in every deployment. So we look at the history of that fleet. We then deploy our system and we observe silently for 3 weeks. So that's literally just measuring what is the risk that's going on. We found that in general, the first week or two, people are on their best behavior because they know we're measuring. It's called the Hawthorne effect. So you change your behavior because you know you're being observed. But in our experience, by the third week, people have forgotten all about it and they go back to their normal habits. And then we rigorously measure after. And usually we take a control group of vehicles we're not in as well. So you can eliminate things like seasonal changes that are happening, or other things that might have been going on, right? If you have a snowstorm, for example, driving behaviors change. We want to be able to compare the fleet we were in or the portion of the fleet we were in versus the one we were not. And so we rigorously measure both the behavior rate before. How often were you touching your phone? Turns out in a typical commercial fleet, people use their phone 7 times per driving hour. In other words, every 9 minutes or so, they're touching their phone. Phones are super addictive, super dangerous. If you take nothing away from this conversation for your driving other than put your phone away, then that's already a great result. And then we measure that same behavior rate after. And typically we see you're down to touching your phone once every 2, 3, 4 hours of driving, which is great. It's almost an order of magnitude change. And then we also measure the collision rate before and after. So how many collisions per million miles did you have before Nauto deployment, and how many do you have after? And that's how we can get very quantitative. The only part of what we do that's hard to know for sure is, how many fatalities, how many lives have we saved? Because it's very hard to know, would this particular collision have led to a fatality? But in some very large fleets that we work with, you can actually see that because, they might have had 10 fatalities last year. This year they have only 1 or 2. Then you probably saved 9 lives there.
I fully get that, and I appreciate the complexity that goes into measuring something like that. But it sounds like once you're able to articulate a reasoning and a rationale for how you're going about it, I can only imagine how also motivating that is for somebody who's on the deeply analytical sides of the team. And so I think that's very cool.
I'll tell you that the biggest impact isn't actually the analytic part, but is seeing one of these moments where there was a huge risk going on. The driver wasn't aware. We alert the driver. They look up. They usually have this, surprise shocked expression. They hit the brakes. They swerve. And then usually there's some 4-letter word after that where the driver goes, damn, or worse than that.
Yeah.
And they realize, oh my God, that was a dangerous moment. seeing those videos is life changing. People cheer, people celebrate, like, oh, and oftentimes drivers will share that, right? They become fans. They say, look,
Yeah,
this saved my life. I wouldn't be here. So
incredible. Stefan, I want to wish you best of luck in your journey with Nauto. It sounds awesome, and I can experience from this conversation the how the impact that this has on you, and I mean, you said it yourself that the things you get to do in the day to day can have life changing moments, and I can only aspire for myself and any other entrepreneur to be working on things that can provide them life changing experiences, and that they could happen any day. And so, very, very cool work and important work. And I want to wish you best of luck, and thank you again for coming on and being a part of this experiment, and for sharing your story.
thanks so much. It's a pleasure.